Well, let's go to the topic of your Beltway brief. Democrats and Republicans both facing reckonings. And let me just preface this by saying it's a really interesting time in the life of the administration to be alive because everything's getting very real now. So, I mean, I don't even know how many bullet points we could pull out from recent events. But we got Tom Tillis, our not so friend Tom Tillis, announcing he's not going to seek re-election. And that's just fine by many of us. But you have, Newsom, we've talked about before, sort of signaling he's going to try to change and then getting pummeled by the progressives. And there is going to be a lot more of these fights, as we saw recently with Iran and Israel and, intervention versus non-intervention on the right. So there's kind of a ferment out there, and it's starting the cauldron's starting to boil, right? More and more, and I see more and more of this. And this is actually where it gets really interesting because this is actually where the rubber meets the road, and some new things might be birthed out of this that could actually help us. But tell us about your Beltway brief and your thoughts.
Sure, thank you. Absolutely. At the beginning of the year, the sides were lined up against each other. Democrats let's start with the Democrats. The far left, AOC and Bernie Sanders and their tour, and those Democrats from Chuck Schumer to Gavin Newsom, surprising figures for this, who said, hold on, let's pump the brakes on some of these policies. We seem to be picking a lot of 90-10 issues that the American people are against as mainstays of our domestic policy. And that could have dangerous impacts for voters. We're not trying to drive this party off the cliff waving the progressive banners. We're trying to win. And then you can do different things. Let's take a card out of Barack Obama's book, who talked like Ronald Reagan, but governed to the left of Jimmy Carter. And those people were shutted down and beaten up pretty quickly. And you saw when Newsom went against men competing in women's sports, every comment against him from prominent Democrats had a name attached to it. But those people who came out and said, listen, this is just common sense. The American people don't want this. It doesn't make sense, and Democrats can't die on this hill. Those people never even would put their names on their defense of Gavin Newsom, who was considered the front runner, essentially, to be the Democratic nominee for president next round. Just because they were afraid of that same hit squad coming for them, that same mob coming for them. So they were worried, and Gavin Newsom ended up having to take a step back and start repeating those left-wing orthodoxies once again. But the mayoral race in New York has really helped clinch the deal, where you're realizing that these Chuck Schumers, these Nancy Pelosi's, these liberals and these leftists, and they're actually significantly more sane than Gen Zers who are coming up behind them. The activist class that's out there chanting a Glastonbury death to the IDF, or out there chanting a free Palestine, a river to the sea, and all this and all that. And by and large, it seems like the loudest, most vicious, and potentially the future of the Democratic Party. So that civil war that has been much more public than anything going on with the Republicans, much more loud and vicious, is coming to an end. And it's essentially a left-wing mop-up action. They are in charge of the party, and they will be at least through another presidential election, and see if they get another reckoning. And you might see the Democratic establishment strike back. You might see the Clintons and other people get behind Eric Adams and actually help him win the mayoral race for New York. But even that would be like a battle of the bulge. The war is over. This is a last gasp. The left is in charge of the Democratic Party. And on the Republican side, there was a fight between the Hawks and the Doves. Now, I don't think that the Hawks won quite as much as they said they would. Everyone's fighting for what MAGA foreign policy means in a party that's really still, a movement that's really still decided by one man, Donald Trump. And everyone's trying to divine, well, he meant this with what he was saying, or he meant that. Well, we found out that what he said about Iran was essentially what he'd always said about Iran, which is they can't have a bomb. We saw more of that Trump doctrine, which is hit him hard, hit him fast, hit him exactly like you warn him you're going to hit him, and do so in a way that gives off-ramps to conflict. It doesn't end in nation building or regime change, where their countries have the ability to back off and say, okay, I just got my hand slapped in the door, and I'm gonna pull it back now and put it on ice because this isn't working out for me. And the president of the United States saying, yeah, we're not going to come in and topple you now and have to rebuild this country. We're just going to deal with it. And it's something he did in his first term. It's something he's doing in his second term. And a lot of the neocons who'd come back out of the woolwork and were screaming, we need to topple this regime, we need to send in troops, we need to hit more targets, we need to kill the Ayatollah. They didn't get their way. But a major problem for the doves and the non-interventionists in the Republican Party was hyperbole and overreach. Some of the most intelligent and the most eloquent and the best spokesmen that the American right has for hold on, we need to stop this empire building, we need to recognize the actual prudential limits of American power and what it can accomplish, predicted World War III. They went too far in their predictions and were wrong. So while they weren't completely wrong, because President Trump didn't do what the neocons said, and that was good, and that they weren't completely right, and the neocons weren't completely right. There's only so many times you can predict World War III and then have anyone actually take you as a credible and serious force. So if something like this happens again, and I love them all to death, but some of my good friends come out there and say this is a disaster, this will lead to World War III, they're going to be more easily dismissed than they were during the Iran fight, when this was very public, and that's because of damage they've done to their own credibility. That will take time to rebuild. So that fight's not over. The Democrats' fight is over. Republicans, though, the Hawks had a big victory.
Well, Donald Trump, he's like, I'm the parent right now. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have all these kids go to their room. I'm going to make sure that everybody goes out there and calms down and gets everything just settled down a little bit.